You know, I wind up seeing a lot of games through Steam, highlight videos, Reddit, my brother, this channel's Discord, which you should join, it's in the description, no pressure. And naturally, if I see a cool game, I want to play it. But there's one problem. I'm dead broke. You guys ever see that picture of Dante DiVincenzo's bank account before he joined the NBA? That's me currently, except I'm not about to sign a $50 million contract anytime soon, so it's a much sadder alternative to this story where instead of starting my journey as a professional basketball player, I start my journey into severe debt off the back of a single order of chicken wings. That said, I still want to find a way to highlight some of these games even if I don't have the time or money to try them all myself, so today we're going to be talking about 15 games that I've had my eye on, 5 that I just bought on sale, 5 that are unreleased but I've played demos of and those demos have me excited, and then 5 that are out already that I'm eyeing for my next little shopping spree. This isn't even like 10% of my wish list, so I might make more of these videos in the future. Let's start with the games that I just bought. First up is Dead Estate. This is a twin-stick roguelike, think Gungeon or Isaac, and it's centered around escaping a haunted mansion. Rooms in this game do have different layouts in terms of what's in them, but they all seem to be perfect squares and sort of float in the middle of this outer void. It's clearly designed to make you feel claustrophobic and tense. There's even these Mr. X type enemies that chase you around rooms relentlessly until you get to the boss of a certain stage, and all the enemies are born out of these blood pustules to stay on brand with the haunted mansion theme. There's a lot of weird weapons and they disappear once you run out of ammo, so you're forced to keep changing your playstyle on the fly, and it seems like this game is a bit shorter than most roguelikes as well, which is honestly a win for me. I prefer shorter games. As somebody who loves roguelikes but hardly ever finishes them, I'm pretty excited for this one. Also, Boob. Birth is a stripped-back, minimalist puzzle game about death and bones. I guess you could say the gameplay is, bare bones. But I really enjoy puzzle games that use your brain a little bit, but don't leave you stumped for too long. I am kind of stupid, so it's nice to have rewarding puzzles that don't take too much work, and by all accounts, that's what Birth seems to deliver on. It reminds me a lot of A Little to the Left, which is a game that I played the demo for, and also plan on picking up eventually, but Birth's aesthetic spoke to me a bit more overall. It's a little dreary, depressing, and lonely, which is a funny thing to say after saying its aesthetic speaks to me, but it's also comforting with its simple music and satisfying clickety-clackety puzzle sound effects. It's also very short, I think it clocks in at under 2 hours, and it has an overwhelmingly positive rating on Steam, so I'm pretty excited to sit down and shoot through this all in one sitting. Shank 2 is kind of an older game. It came out in 2012, but it's from the same dev team as one of my favorite indies ever made, Mark of the Ninja, so it's been sitting on my wishlist for a hot minute. It's a side-scroller beat-em-up with super clean and fluid animation, which is a staple for Clay Entertainment, whether it's in the fully animated cutscenes that look straight out of an action cartoon, or all the combat animations and interactive environments. In a genre that I sometimes find can be purposefully stiff-feeling, which sort of pulls me away from it, Shank animates and stylizes its combat in a way that I like a lot more. Whether it's hand-to-hand combat, or you're using a chainsaw, or tossing enemies into environmental hazards, or fighting in conditions that make the game look almost Shadow Puppet-esque. This is just way more my vibe than something like Streets of Rage or even Shredder's Revenge. Good games, but I feel like I'm gonna like this a little bit more. Ikaruga is a bullet hell shoot-'em-up that I haven't even started yet, and I can already tell it's gonna destroy my mental state. It looks ridiculously intense, and there are points where the entire screen is just projectiles. I mean, what do you even, how do you, what? The key with Ikaruga is that you can change the polarity of your little spaceship between light and dark, and changing those states will protect you from same colored projectiles. So while you're being bombarded with light and dark projectiles at all times, only one of the two will hurt you at any moment. You constantly need to switch your polarity mid-fight to avoid damage, and there are a lot of incentives to replay the game and boost your high score. I don't think this game is for everyone, but I feel like anyone who's remotely into bullet hells will probably enjoy it. And the last game I picked up is They Always Run. This is a watercolor side-scrolling space western action platformer. I could not show you the game at all and just give you that description, and you'd probably go buy it considering it's on sale for like $3 right now. I will admit that the deep sale was part of why I picked this up despite it being on my radar for a while, because while it does look good and the reviews are generally pretty positive, a lot of the recommends on Steam are a little bit neutral, and having played the demo last year, I can understand where some of the issues come in. The biggest thing I remember from the demo is that the controls were a little bit unusual and stiff, which, along with its kind of poorly laid out enemy encounters, are some of the most consistent complaints about the game based on user reviews. It wasn't a universal problem, and it doesn't seem like people outright hate the combat, but going into it, I'm expecting a style-first, function-second combat system that might not quite reach the potential it shows in trailers. But that's alright, because the setting, concept, and artwork is undeniable, and the action does look like it has its moments to shine. I think it's definitely going to be worth it on sale, because like I said, it was $3. At that point, the game could call me ugly and spit spit in my face and I still wouldn't feel ripped off. Now let's talk about some games that I haven't picked up yet, but I'm still itching to play, starting with the only game on this list that probably doesn't fall under the indie banner. Warhammer 40k Boltgun is another game in a long line of recent love letters to the retro FPS genre, featuring 3D pixel art and the maze-like structure of games like the original Doom or Wolfenstein. There are a few things about this game that really make it stand out though. First of all, it's in the Warhammer 40k universe, which is something that I'm entirely unfamiliar with, but I've always wanted to drop into at some point, which means this could not only be a really fun standalone title to play through, but also be an introduction to one of the more unique gaming franchises out there, which obviously extends to other mediums as well. Second, as part of a larger franchise with a long tenure, this game has a higher production budget than most of its kind, and it shows. The art is so crisp while maintaining that old school feel, the levels seem expansive and more detailed and fully occupied than the typical boomer shooter, and everything from the enemy design to the soundtrack to the weapons and animations looks top of the line. It looks like a retro FPS with all of the charm and none of the limitations. It's definitely a game I'll be getting to soon, and it's one that feels like it went under the radar in a year as packed as this one. Exo One is a relaxing movement-based exploration game where you play as a little ball of something. You roll and saucer your way around the universe through all this different terrain topped with a dreamy afterglow, and your only goal is to just go. Just go forward and figure it out, I guess. I love these casual games that still have a strong emphasis on fluid movement. I made a whole video on these games at the beginning of the year, and Exo One looks like one of the most stripped down yet uninhibited entries in this genre. It's yet another short game, which makes sense. I feel like you can only really keep up with this shtick for a couple of hours, and it launched on all major platforms except for Switch, weirdly enough. I feel like this would have been a really fun Switch game, but if you have anything else and want to kill a few hours, then Exo One looks pretty sweet. Loretta is a choose-your-own-adventure psychological thriller that feeds off of unease and dread. It's basically a window into the life of a woman who's slowly unraveling, but you watch that unraveling backwards through flashbacks. I've tried to keep myself pretty blind on this one, so I physically can't explain this game anymore, but you know, sometimes you're in the mood to be deeply disturbed, so when I am, I'll probably play Loretta. Doomblade looks kinda silly. It's a Metroidvania where you're in a constant spin cycle, and I honestly don't love how the physics look at a first glance. Both attacks and jumps feel like they're missing weight. But its commitment to staying airborne and making everything super quick from movement to combat does seem very appealing, and it's gotten a lot of love on the Metroidvania subreddit to go along with a really stellar score on Steam, albeit off a low number of reviews. I love Metroidvanias, I love fast combat, I love when developers literally dump copious amounts of red into every frame of the game, and I love not touching the ground, so I'm gonna put aside some of my initial criticisms and see how this feels in action. If I ever get a Steam Deck, this actually looks like it'll be the perfect first game to play on that system. And rounding out this section is Can of Wormholes. This is a weird little puzzle game where you play as a sentient can, and I've seen puzzles that range from looking like they're a continuation of that little block game on Funbrain to something straight out of The Witness. It's apparently got a lot of surprises up its sleeves, and a consistent piece of praise it's gotten is that it has an incredible hint system, which is nice for somebody like me who is, may I remind you, incredibly stupid. It doesn't have too many reviews, but the ones it does have it sitting at a 99, so do with that what you will. And last up, let's talk about 5 upcoming games that I haven't seen get much coverage, but I think they're pretty cool. First up is Almost. This is a speedrunning game where you can swap between day and night, which slightly alters the world and gives you more platforms, walls, or launch points to boost, grapple, and jump around on. As a huge fan of Neon White, this is something that's really caught my interest. It is lacking the combat that made Neon White so addicting and versatile to me, but it does feature even more ways to exploit the level design and conserve your motions, so I'm sure it'll still be a lot of fun trying to outdo your previous high scores. It's got a demo if you want to check it out. Neon White was one of my favorite games of last year, so I hope this game can bring some of that same heat. On Garde was described in my Discord as Sifu but good, and the man responsible for that statement was swiftly taken to a back alley and beaten to death. To me, On Garde is Sifu but goofier and more accessible. It doesn't feature the punishing semi-roguelike structure of Sifu or its incredibly tight timing windows, but it still thrives on its group combat where you dodge, weave, parry, attack, and use the environment to your advantage. There's a lot of charm in its pirate setting, and the fun little one-liners from your character or the goons you fight, and while it's not the toughest game out there, it's also not a walk in the park on the right difficulty. You really need to work on your crowd control to find ways to distract, stagger, or preoccupy enemies in order to not get overwhelmed. It really pushes you to parry full combos, and features what's now a staple in these action games, which is unblockable red attacks that can only be dodged. It also has a demo. That demo puts the combat on full display, and it comes out next month, so if you're a fan of action games, especially I'd say Sifu, Arkham, and Ghost of Tsushima, this is probably in your wheelhouse. Echo Point Nova is a new game from the creators of Severed Steel, which is a highly stylized stylized FPS game that forces you to use unique movement abilities to traverse levels and dodge bullets. It's definitely one of the better indie shooters I've played, and it looks like they have another great game on their hands if this demo is anything to go by. Levels have minimalist but highly explorable layouts. Not only can you shoot yourself upwards with a tornado, double jump, grapple, and hoverboard around on the ground or on the walls, but you can also destroy elements of the environment to find secrets or flank enemies. The gunplay is super snappy. The demo never lingered on one idea or one ability or one weapon for too long. It was constantly evolving, and it looks like you'll be able to explore a lot of different biomes, from floating greenery to frozen tundras to dry deserty areas. This is a game that puts its full emphasis on freedom of movement and high velocity gameplay. It'll be interesting to see if it can pace itself well for the full campaign and maybe incorporate some fun puzzle elements to break the monotony, but even as a straight shooter, I wouldn't mind a decently sized campaign with these mechanics. Laika Aged Through Blood is a super fun concept with a solid demo that shows off its potential. It's got great animated cutscenes, and even in gameplay features very nice environmental design. And then you get to the gameplay, and it's like this motorcycle aerial shooter where you can parry bullets or block them with your bike, you reload by doing tricks, and you always remain in constant motion. Looks like there's going to be a strong emphasis on story, and that story is going to be a little dark and somber, and it incorporates some light RPG elements too. I am curious about how this game can scale. I'm wondering how many enemy types you can realistically have with this concept, and whether your own abilities and arsenal will grow at a respectable rate, but as far as the fundamentals go, I'm liking a lot of what this game is putting down. It was the Next Fest demo that I was most looking forward to play. And lastly, we have a game whose reveal I felt went a little under the radar, Everhood 2. The first Everhood was a lot of fun. It clearly took a lot of inspiration from Undertale, and while I did enjoy its psychedelic spin on it all, I will say I didn't find it as witty or as funny as parts of Undertale that I've experienced. But what really drove Everhood to greatness for me was the music and the gameplay. This is a game where the enemies attack you with songs, and you start as this little goo goo gaga loser who has to avoid everything, but then eventually you chat up and start launching the music back at enemies. It sounds ridiculous, and it is, which is why it's good. Most of Everhood 2's changes seem to be coming in the overworld, which I do think was the weaker side of that game, so that's nice, and most of the core combat does seem fairly untouched, although I'm sure they'll throw in some twists in there as the game goes on. Everhood is a really fun game. If you haven't played it, you should, and then you should put Everhood 2 on your wish list. Hopefully you guys found some games that caught your interest. Feel free to leave your own recommendations in the comments. If you're new here, subscribe, join the Discord, it's in the description, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace.